Okay, so for the third round in a row, we see a mono blue devotion player on the right. Leading off with Island Cloudfin Raptor.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, Church is familiar.
You have a sponsor this round?
Oh, we'll get there.
Okay.
So on the left, we've got. Have we already done introductions? No. Not the most professional, but it's also difficult to do this. I don't know. I don't care at this point. So let's talk about Magic. On the left, we've got Ed Pfender, your defending Ohio State champion. He is from Washington, PA, even though it says Washington, PA on my...
So the defending Ohio State champion.
He's going to try to go back-to-back, double states. He's trying to expand his empire here.
Living in Pennsylvania, coming out for West Virginia State championship.
Absolutely, but we are... He's from Washington, so it's basically, 30 minutes north of Morgantown, give or take, so... And he is playing blue-white control, and he's undefeated on the day. And his opponent is Riley Oveson from Brownsville, PA, who is on mono blue devotion.
And we're on mono PA players.
We're on mono PA. We're also on our third round of mono blue, which seems interesting because, as we talked about in earlier rounds, I didn't think that was still a deck, but it definitely is. And as Garrett pointed out, if the whole room is red-green monsters, it's a very good deck. But we've talked about this all day. The blue-white deck should be a huge advantage in this matchup. Obviously, all games are independent of on paper, but Riley having landed a turn 4 Bident is going to help him considerably in this matchup. Oh, Riley scooping up his cards preemptively, assuming it was Verdict, but it's not. A Jace ticks up. But unfortunately for Ed, the creatures that Riley has on board, not the kind that are too hurt by the Jace +1 ability.
So you're going to point out the Jace trigger.
Yeah, props to Ed for actually acknowledging the trigger. That's something a lot of people
It's
don't.
not something that you actually have to acknowledge anymore. As long as you let your opponent know before it actually affects the game.
It's still nice to see people conscious of their own cards, which
Yeah.
is something. I don't fault people for missing things out of their opponent's deck because you can't be intimately familiar with every card in Standard. But
this is a large cash tournament for and it's competitive REL, so he could have also just said the blocks, and then if no comes from the Frostburn Weird, it dealt 0 damage.
yeah, that was a very interesting change to the rules. And again, I apologize for the glare there. It looks like a 1 of Fated Retribution, a blue-white temple, and an island. Is that the Retribution?
Looks like it.
That's the worst spot for glare all day, is right there in the middle. That's very clearly Fated Retribution because it has 3 white mana symbols in the cost. And that's what he takes, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then follows up with a Distension Sphere. No, a Divination. You still play Divination?
Yeah.
I do. Come here.
So in the room today, my name, as always, is Zachary Evans. I'm the Zach and Zach Sells Magic. I'm joined by the X whatever drop bracket of Garrett Meadows, Jonathan Wright, and George Arbogast is loitering in the back, enjoying some Subway. This round sponsored by Subway. Also sponsored by Your Hobby Place in Martinsburg, West Virginia. So if you're ever in the Eastern Panhandle, from Maryland or DC Metro, head over to Your Hobby Place.
So here's a Cloudfin Raptor just blurting out on the field.
There's the Verdict.
I apologize. I should have done this beforehand, but a little bit frazzled.
And now we're getting to an interesting point in the game where Ed's going to want to fire off this Fated Retribution to help deal with this. I don't think Riley actually has any Meatballs in play.
He is drawing a lot of lands, but
Yeah, he's drawn 7 lands and none of them are Mutavaults. But he does reload with a... there are elemental tokens right next to those dice, which I think is funny, but they don't know anything.
Well, we know that they have 6 elemental tokens.
Yep, so Ed is going to dig for the 7th land there.
Well, he also just wants to get more value out of this Jace, as he's probably casting Fated Retribution.
Oh, it's the bluff where you do it before you play your land. I'm digging for land, but guess what? I've got the 7th one in my hand. I like that a lot. I know it's probably like a very minor thing, and
no, it's definitely a big play there.
well, he had to do that because it's Chase time.
Yeah, but he could have played his land, is what I mean. Like,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Well, yeah,
it's a nominal thing, but it's just fun to see things like that where it's
More like a phenomenal thing.
Yeah, there was a very famous Pro Tour finals in which Antoine Rouel, playing Psychotog, cast a main phase Factor Fiction to try and convince his opponent he was looking for land, and his opponent gave him a split that was very heavy to the land pile, and Antoine just took the other pile and beat him with it because he had a land in his hand. But just being willing to cast an instant at sorcery speed just to bluff your opponent.
I'm going to go ahead and let these players know that those cards go on the bottom of the library.
Okay, so Garrett's going to go out, and I don't think it's going to matter, but it's definitely something that needs to be addressed because the Architect of Thought does not put cards into the bin, it puts them into the bottom of one's library. So there's a D-Sphere, likely going to answer the Jace. Lots of good targets in this deck for D-Spheres. You going to take the Bident at this point? The Frostburn Weird?
This is a tough choice, actually.
It's either the Bident or the Jace for sure. We're not. Are you considering the Frostburn Weird at some point here? Is that Thassa's rebuff? Jeez.
It's playing the rebuff.
Main deck rebuff too.
Okay.
So Ed chooses to D-Sphere the Bident. We fight over it a bit. Thassa's rebuff versus dissolve, and Ed shoves the card. Yeah, playing it in the main. Not sure how many copies. It's very likely it's just the one. And then Riley bends his Jace, revealing the awkward split of 2 islands or a Judge's Familiar. Judge's Familiar might as well be an island at this stage of the game, as it does literally nothing into this board state. And then Riley, all content. It's interesting. He fought over that Bident, and then just replayed one, which
legendary.
Which is either a just like a high level bluff, or he just drew that second copy of the Bident.
Mm-hmm.
So passes back. Ed down to 5 here. Obviously, the mono blue deck can't do the kind of instant speed damage that some of the other decks can. There's an Elixir, which is going to make his life total effectively 10. I forgot to do my tweet. What is it? The one in the middle? That's a Elixir?
Is that another rebuff?
So it looks like a Thassa's rebuff, yeah. And now Ed has to decide if he wants to fight over it.
Did he pump his Frostburn Weird before he did that? It looks like?
He had pumped it on the other turn. He cast a Bident, then pumped his Frostburn 1 to leave up the rebuff mana.
Gotcha. There's a Thassa. So this game quickly getting out of control, right?
This is game right here. If he, well, of course he can sack it and still deal 4 to him. So he's a 1.
So we tried to Azorius Charm, and Judge's Familiar gets in the way of that.
Draw a card off the Bident. Or not.
Did he miss it?
I couldn't say.
We've seen some missed triggers today on the stream. So Ed in a pickle here. He's already used it. He's already used it. His 1 copy of Fated Retribution. Speaks like some kind of Swedish exchange student. But there's not a lot of cards that he needs a rev.
His head above water.
Yeah, he needs to deal with the Jace. Now, do you dig here?
Dig for, I'd imagine,
Verdict.
A verdict or some kind of Azorius Charm works.
Oh, Verdict. Verdict, Charm, Dissolve. So pretty good 3-pack here. You take the. Okay. I don't like that split at all.
I like it if I'm Ed.
Yeah, it's a good point. And you have to Verdict here, don't you?
No, not necessarily.
Well, I mean,
Azorius Charm.
Verdict also just kills the Weird and leaves him dead to any 2 devotion.
Oh, good point. I forgot about the Bident. Much like people forgot about Dre, I forgot about the Bident of Thassa.
He's just going to. So if he can produce 1 devotion, he has 2 opportunities to scry, or 1 opportunity. And
there is a Frostburn word, so Thassa is active.
Game.
And unless they printed,
oh, we even got this one too.
For the rubbish.
Oh, we even got this one.
What? Where did these cards come from? So it's like,
yep.
Riley is subscribing to the school of you can't be a still had all these guys if you play all of your cards before you attack them to death. But Ed did a pretty good job of stabilizing. It's very interesting. I think Riley's deck is we've seen a lot of mono blue today. Riley's deck is the first deck that has main deck Thassa's rebuff
Yeah,
in
it's
it.
going to be interesting seeing Ed play around that. Of course, they probably come out for gain saves, maybe some heavier counter spells. But
yeah, well, we've talked about it before. The sideboarding for the mono blue deck is pretty tough because you have to make your deck actively worse against the control decks. You have to bring in cards that don't do damage, that are reactionary.
Take out your familiars.
Yeah, where in reality you want to be as aggressive as you can be. So we'll take a look at Thassa's rebuff, which is basically a 2-mana syncopate, where the X is equal to your devotion to blue, which in the mono blue decks is almost always an actual syncopate, but a lot of times just a hard counter, basically.
So he's playing, what, we saw 2 there?
We saw 2 in his main deck, yeah.
That would be the number.
I can't imagine you. I was surprised to have seen the second one,
Yeah,
let alone
the first one.
any more beyond that. But again, I want to remind everyone that the sponsor for this round is Your Hobby Place in Martinsburg, West Virginia. So if you're over on the eastern Panhandle of West Virginia, or if you're in Maryland or near the D.C. metro area, head over to Your Hobby Place in Martinsburg. You see their phone number right there. Your source for games and hobbies. It's nice that they double up on both the games and the hobbies. Mm-hmm. I figure if you get just games, you're really missing out on the hobbies.
Well, it also makes a clear distinction that their gamers are hardcore, because those games are not their hobbies.
No, those are just games.
Those are only games. Hobbies are on the other side of the store.
Hobbies are completely...
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense.
It turned out to be a guest in the hotel that this conference room is attached to, who had put a bunch of metal and garbage in a microwave to try and start a fire. That's an actual thing we heard from the...
Why?
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. You're looking for logic in a situation that has none.
Were they signing out? Okay, anyway.
I don't know. I literally don't know.
No, they were checking in.
But I do know that story came from the woman who runs this hotel. So that's not just like something that they have it on video. But we'll quit talking about the supposed fire-starting hotel residents and get back to our game. So Ed on the play, both players keeping their opening 7. Ed down a game as he just could not find an answer to the second and third wave of creatures that Riley's mono blue deck produced. But Ed in a great spot here. Turn 2 Gainsay on a Frostburn Weird. Turn 3 Dissolve on a Night Veil Spectre.
That was a very aggressive negate, or not negate, Gainsay. I'd imagine his hand is mostly counter spells and lacking a verdict if he's...
I don't know Ed. I've seen him at a variety of like PTQs and stuff. Mm-hmm. But we do know that he is the defending Ohio State champ. I figure from Pennsylvania. I figure he knows what he's doing. Yeah. But you're right. It does kind of telegraph the contents of his hand if he is willing to burn that Gainsay on a very innocuous creature. Or it just might be a tempo play if he doesn't necessarily see a situation in which he's, if he's land light, possibly. Might be a situation. Well, there's a tell that Ryan does not have a Thassa's This is the best. Ugh. The turn... Oh! If you thought that was aggressive, how aggressive do you think the dissolve on your Cloudfin Raptor is?
No, that was a Quicken.
Oh, a Quicken, I'm sorry. They look very similar. But there's no card that's more depressing than the turn 1000 Cloudfin Raptor. Riley just down... There's something about Riley's deck today in this round that are just producing a ton of lands. So Seeing is great. What's this tell for Seeing his graveyard?
Well, we're going to cast something very important. He wants to see how many counterspells.
Is he trying to fight over a Thassa or Jace or something here? He doesn't have the luxury of being able to hold things back, I don't think.
Well, the best card right here would be a...
Is he playing Elspeth?
Aetherling.
Okay.
Wow. Aetherling sticks, which is it's got to be very frustrating for Ed because he just cycled a Quicken and he has a Supreme Verdict in his hand.
Man. See, that's why I don't like the early counter on the Frostburn Weird.
But I want to be honest with you, it's not entirely expected to see Riley cast an Aetherling at this point.
Also, Ed could be at like 5 from that Frostburn Weird, Jonathan.
What is it?
He could be like 5 from that Frostburn Weird by now.
Distinction Sphere.
Then he'd have a...
Let's race.
Biden. Ew. Is that a Tromocratus? Oh, no, that's another Aetherling.
No, it's an Aetherling. And I would think in this matchup, if we're racing Aetherlings, I would think that Ed would be the favorite, considering he has Sphinx's Revelation, Elixir of Immortality, and Azorius Charms.
And maybe even the one-up Disperse that some of these blue-white decks play. Riley, on the other hand, of course, has Rapid Hybridization and Cyclonic Rift as his weapons to fight with.
And
Ed's brutal to watch. Ed's down to one card in his hand.
Well, I tried to say Aetherling, then you all gushed over the Aetherling that came into play. But usually one or two of in these mono blue sideboards for this matchup.
And Ed's just going to get in there as well. So the battling of 8-point life swings as Riley drops down to 12. So like we say, what are the relevant cards at this point? Well, it's Rapid Hybridization out of Riley's deck along with Cyclonic Rift.
Specifically here, we are looking for another creature that will evolve this Cloudman Raptor and present lethal next turn. And then be able to fight over whatever answer Ed may have.
I think we're calling a judge here, and the question is, if I blink my Aetherling, does it evolve the Cloudfin Raptor? The answer is absolutely it does.
That is a very nice play.
And that will
present lethal.
That will present lethal.
That. Oh. I'll activate this now. Make sure you're not doing it on the instep.
Right. Because it won't come back till the next turn.
Yes. Aetherling comes back at the beginning of the instep.
So it comes back.
So this is main phase.
So Ed is dead here, short of an Azorius Charm, right? Is that the only thing that's good?
Last Breath on the Cloudfin Raptor also works.
Azorius Charm on Aetherling, Thassa's rebuff, and that's going to be it. So Riley keeps... well, it's not necessarily about his keep, but his game plan was entirely stymied by Ed early. But then we see the power of Aetherling. That game literally was Ryan resolves an Aetherling. He waits for a point where he can sneak in an Aetherling and then just won the game off the back of it.
Yep.
Everything else was irrelevant. He just sideboards in probably one copy of Aetherling. He happens to find it. He waits until Ed has exhausted the majority of his counter magic, or he is just, at that stage in the game, Ed had just coincidentally exhausted most of his counter magic. As we see their sideboard plans here, which is always an interesting.
Well, to be fair, I mean, what Jonathan's point is that there was a counterspell blown very, very early on a Frostburn Weird, and if Ed's plan had a late game card in it and a lot of counterspells, whether it be like a Sphinx's Revelation or an Aetherling, like turn 6 Aetherling or turn 7 Aetherling in some cases, could very well win him the game, and that's about one of the only cards that punishes him for making those plays early on.
All of those things that I mentioned earlier about how the deck gets worse because you have to side in reactive cards, Aetherling is not one of those cards. Aetherling changes that entire point. I also think it's funny that there are two of you here, but because of the camera angle, it looks like it's just me. Heyo! But now, look at that. Now that we have the darkness outside, we can actually you can actually see things. Alex